Tonight, NJCDC is proud to sponsor a hearing with the Passaic Valley Water Commission to talk about their plan to drain the reservoirs and to replace them with concrete tanks. Looks to be a good meeting. There are a lot of people here at a packed Patterson Museum, and hopefully there'll be some good dialogue so that the Passaic Valley Water Commission understands how the people of Patterson feel about this important project. My name is Bob Garashi, and I am the CEO of a nonprofit organization that does our work here in Patterson's Great Falls Historic District called New Jersey Community Development Corporation, or NJCDC. It is indeed heartening to see all of you out here this evening for really what I would describe as a good old-fashioned town hall meeting. The topic, of course, is the plans by the Passaic Valley Water Commission to address a problem that has been pointed out by the U.S. EPA and the State Department of Environmental Protection, yet laid at the doorstep of the Passaic Valley Water Commission as the ultimate decision makers, is whether or not the reservoirs that serve our area will be drained and in their place concrete water tanks be placed as part of their solution to the problem that exists. You will hear more about that problem because we will give our friends from the Passaic Valley Water Commission an opportunity to speak this evening and to make their presentation. At all times, no matter what the issue in any forum, I believe that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And those are the main rules for tonight. There may be some people here who want to support the plans of the Water Commission, and I suspect that there are people here who are in opposition to those plans. But most importantly, we are pleased at NJCDC, along with our friends at the Passaic County Board of Realtors, to have sparked a dialogue, to have opened a process, because government works best when the light shines in. And I'm deeply grateful that our friends at the Passaic Valley Water Commission have decided to participate in public hearings so that the voice of the people can be heard on this very large public works project that they are proposing. So before we hear from the Passaic Valley Water Commission, we have with us, as you know, let me just preface it by saying that the Water Commission is actually owned by three large cities, the cities of Patterson and Passaic and Clifton, even though they serve many more towns and municipalities. And tonight we have with us the mayor of the largest city of all of the three, the mayor of Patterson. Please help me welcome Mayor Jose Joey Torres.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here and to this public demonstration of what democracy is all about, right? And we're here in a building that represents historical moments and historical times. And not too far from here, which is represented within the halls of the museum, is the labor movement, as it reflects to child labor, as it reflects to Patterson being the silk city or the cradle of industry, where it was Alexander Hamilton's vision, where he had a picnic lunch with the first planner in the country, Washington, D.C., and in Patterson, which was LaFont, and the first treasurer of the United States, who was also the founder of Patterson, Alexander Hamilton, and General Washington. And out of there, in a picnic lunch, as history dictates, or tells us, as a story is told, that Alexander Hamilton's vision was to move us from an agrarian society into an industrial society. And the means that he was going to do it was that he was going to harness harness the power of the raceway. And as you may know today, the turbine engines, the turbines at the MUA, that still produces energy today. And that's why Patterson was one of the first, was known as one of the oldest industrial city in the nation. And I tend to believe that that's why Patterson is one of the major owners of Passaic Valley Water, whereby we actually appoint 3 members of the commission are Patterson members, which I'm glad to say that represents the city of Patterson at large, as well with the other co-owners of Passaic and Clifton. And so today, being in this historic building and seeing the public come to listen to what Bob indicated is a mandate, a mandate by the federal government, and I believe the Environmental Protection Agency is EPA, and to adhere to another mandate that could have come out of DEP. We realize that 2 things have occurred. That the planning process wasn't really opened up, I'm not blaming the fingers, at least to me, wasn't opened up to community participation. And so when you turn around and look at community participation as it relates to a planning process that's going to affect thousands and thousands of members of John Q. Public within not only the three owner towns, but ratepayers that reach over 27 or 20 other boroughs and municipalities within the Passaic County area, and I think maybe touches on some of Bergen County as well. Okay? So when we're going to spend taxpayers' dollars that ultimately is going to have to be recouped by the taxpayers through the rate that you pay for water, then this is very much part of the process. And so in one of my planning, seminar that I attended to Princeton, which I was one of 6 urban mayors, the big urban mayors, the big cities. And in there, they told us about a term, and I am mispronouncing it, but it was a French term, and talk about a charrette. Right? Did I say right? Okay. And so, thanks, Eddie, because a charrette is a meeting in which all stakeholders in a project attempts to resolve conflict and map out solutions. Conflict and map out solutions. So here today, we are all here to map out, attempt to resolve a conflict that I believe exists, and map out a solution. And so, in preparing for this opening comments, I quickly asked staff to do me a favor and to identify our neighboring towns that are part of the vendors, right, the ratepayers that buy the precious commodity of water from Passaic Valley Water, and identify them, how many of them presented resolutions supporting a delay in this tanking project, or this concrete tanks of what we're talking about. And interesting enough, all of the towns or boroughs or cities, municipalities, that are vendors or buy the water that the ratepayers that this project is going to ultimately affect, whether it's the real estate component or just paying more for your water, all of them, interesting enough, except the 3 major cities have sponsored a resolution in support of delaying this project. And so, in preparing, it was quite alarming, and I immediately reached out to Mr. Bello, the executive director of the water company, and told him to place me on the agenda for Wednesday's meeting, in which I will be attending. However, I think it's imperative and appropriate for me to not only welcome you to this conflict resolution that we're going to attempt to do, to map out a viable solution, but I'm here to publicly state to each and every one of you, representing your organizations or your municipalities, that I am presenting tomorrow for the council to add on their council agenda a resolution that reads as follows. Whereas in response to a federal Environmental Protection Agency mandate to cover all treated drinking water supplies, the Passaic Valley Water Commission is planning on draining 3 reservoirs on Garrett Mountain and replacing them with large concrete tanks. Now, before I continue to address that factor, it is no secret that the Levine Reservoir falls within the footprint of the National Park Service, the City of Patterson, and the National Park. It first was a state park, right, Frank? And then it became a national park. And so now we have a federal agency demanding and dictating that something that falls within the National Park Service, now that they have to go ahead and drain something as natural as the Levine Reservoir. So I mentioned and I opened up the fact that Alexander Hamilton and we still are powering and making energy from the MUA building. But the fact of the matter is that the historic integrity and the historic value does not lie or rest within the Great Falls, which we're very proud of. It rests within the historic significance and the value of the raceways. So I am not no engineer, but we know that we have a problem of maintaining the water within the raceways. And so if we're thinking that we have to drain a reservoir that fits at the highest point of the Great Falls, then perhaps I challenge the engineering marvels to think of rechanneling the water from the reservoir and letting that be channeled through the raceways so that now the hydraulic and the historical significance and the interpretation of the national park, not only as the Great Falls, but that we see the water that actually powered the mills as it relates to the raceways. So that by keeping the water not being stagnant, waiting for drinking, it's being circulated throughout the raceways and channeled back up to the reservoir, which will be your natural pump. And perhaps if we need to do some filtering and preparing it, it could be at that stage, and I think that we will gain much more value than actually taking the water and tanking it away for future use. And whereas the reservoir at the Levine New Street in Great Notch, which happens to form about half of the western border of Rifle Camp County Park, and whereas the construction of the tanks would mar the landscape of the immediate area, which saddles Patterson and Woodland Park, and will cost upward of $100 million, and I'm being conservative because we know we've been throwing that number of more of $150 million, and whereas the cost would be passed on to the consumer, and whereas being the local residents have been drinking the water for decades, and whereas the lawsuit filed against the mandate by New York City and Portland, Oregon, has spurred the Environmental Protection Agency to revisit the requirement known as LT2, and that the EPA is taking until 2016 to release an updated version of that report. And whereas the Environmental Protection Agency has also granted New York City an extension for one particular expensive reservoir replacement project. And whereas based on this information, the Passaic County Planning Department would like to see that the Passaic Valley Water Commission delay, and at this point, the City of Patterson, as an owner city, would like to delay movement on the construction until an update rules are released and less harmful solutions are explored. And whereas these three sites about residential neighborhoods and the introduction of the tanks would render them industrial in look, which also raises residents' water rates. And whereas the mayor and the council of the city of Paterson are desirous of demonstrating their support for the full delay on this project until the update rules are released in 2016. And then it goes, now therefore be it resolved that the municipal council, and I'm asking the other two owners, as we speak, I've been having some discussion with the other two owners, Passaic and Clifton, to give us the two concurrent resolution, and that these resolutions will be forward to our New Jersey legislative or congressional delegation, and ask them to assist us and asking the Environmental Protection Agency to assist us in postponing this mandate, this unfunded mandate that they're making us to do when we know that the verdict is still out. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. And let it furthermore be resolved that I will be hosting, I'm asking that NJCDC be the host entity that will host a meeting with all the 30 municipalities and their mayors and their business administrator, and we will invite the federal legislative delegation so that way we could voice it in one room, similarly as we do in here, in the spirit of cooperation, which will be a meeting of all the stakeholders to talk about and resolve the conflict, but more importantly, to map a resolution. Thank you so much for being here in attendance. And I want to apologize soon. I'll be leaving, so I won't stay for the whole thing, but I've heard this before.
Thank you, Mayor Torres. I'd like to now introduce the Executive Director of the Passaic Valley Water Commission, who will, with his colleagues, make a presentation about their plans. Please welcome Mr. Joseph Bella. And Joe, I'm sorry, before you start, I meant to say at the beginning, if there's anyone here who needs translation services, there's a young lady in the back. Letty, if you'll raise your hand, please see Letty in the back, and she will give you a device to help you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for all coming out. It's just great to see everybody and so much interest in this project. It is something that's been around for a long time. I'd like to thank Bob and Mayor Torres, who's always been a great supporter of the Passaic Valley Water Commission, and it's good to see him at this thing. So, anyway, I just want to talk about the background for this, where it originated, why we come to this, and what the industry is doing about it. Oh, I'm sorry. I do that, and I speak too softly too. So at any rate, there we go. This is basically, as we said, it was a mandate by the EPA, their rules, going back some years ago. And the other thing, besides that mandate, there is the major issue is protecting public health. This has been in the public health arena for years. I think it goes back to 1933 when they had a forum which basically said that you should not have treated drinking water out in open finished reservoirs. There we go. This is one I like to show because It gives you an idea of what the industry is doing and what we're faced as people in this industry, in the water treatment industry. Basically, I've got to get used to this, sorry. This is the number of these types of reservoirs that were in service in 1975. This comes from EPA. They were the ones that gave us these numbers. But there was 750 of them. And you can see that by 1999, almost 80% of them were done before there was a mandate, before there was even actually discussion about a mandate. Then later on here is when the first notifications, proposed rules were, and that's how EPA works. They propose the rules and there's dialogue about that kind of thing, about what, people can comment on the rule. And then by 2006, the final rules published, and then the compliance deadline was 2009. So you can see by even here, by the time the rule was actually finalized, more than 80, or almost 90% of them are done, and now we're actually out here. Well, that made a difference. So you actually see that now there are about 14 of them left in the entire country, open finished water reservoirs. And that's where we find ourselves. And what this points to is there's a standard of care that we're held to by the industry, by the way the industry, regardless of regulations. We're sort of almost, I mean, it is a industry standard that you don't treat the water and then put it out into natural ponds and let them sort of get recontaminated after you've treated it. I'm going to show you here. Basically, this is sort of a stylized version of what happens with your water. You have the river, and the water comes from the river. In our case, it's the Passaic River, just above the Little Falls. And it goes into our treatment plant, which is one of the state-of-the-art treatment plants, and at one time it was the largest one in the country of its type. Technology is now being used pretty much around the world. And Mayor Torres was our keynote speaker there and did a great job of that. I still remember that all those years ago. And then from there, after it's treated, and you go through this whole process, it costs about $500 a million gallons to treat the water. The water then goes out and we store it. Parts of it get stored. In other words, as you use water, the unused portion of that water goes into those reservoirs. Now, once you start up and you start washing and running, taking showers and that kind of thing, the water actually will flow back out of those. Then at night, the water is flowing back in. So it's kind of being filled and drawn by how much water you use, and that dictates that. Now, the reason why we do that is because treatment plants don't like being running up and down. So our peak hourly demand, those every hour, how much you use, we don't try to run the plant at that level. We try to run it at a very constant level. And so you need, what I'm saying here is you need a place to store water. So from there, some of the water will come from the plant and directly into your pipes and into your houses. Some of the unused portion goes into here until you have a fire or a big demand. Like when you're, like on a Saturday morning, it's a big demand. Everybody's washing clothes and cars and that kind of thing. And then when it gets real hot, there's big demands, those kind of things. So that's what we're trying to do here is take the water where it doesn't come back out into the open after it's been treated and keep it so it's contained, so it's not open to the atmosphere. Oh. Now, all treatment plants are designed in this way. The treatment plants are designed in what we call a multi-barrier approach to water treatment. So you take the water out of the river, and the first step we do is clarification. Now, the clarification is basically removing 90%, 99% of the suspended material, much of the bacteria, parasites, viruses, pathogens and that sort of thing. And you're trying to get it as clear as possible. So if it comes in from the river, it has a clarity of around 10. By the time it leaves this phase right here, it's under 1. So you dropped it by 10 times. You're clearing the water. The reason why you clear the water at that level is once you hit your disinfection, and that's when we hit it with disinfection, the reason why in our case, it's ozone, you want it as clear as possible so that those molecules can attack the pathogens that are normally found in water out in the river. So now you've knocked down the bulk of the pathogens. And you can see this here. This is the coliform bacteria count in the river. And then when you go through clarification, you drop it down, but you removed a lot of the stuff that causes the water to be cloudy. Then you get into your ozonation, it drops down almost to 0. Then we have another barrier. We add some chlorine, a small amount of chlorine, and that drops it to 0. Then after we do all that, we filter it. And this is filtration. In our particular place, we use a multi-process and filtration. What we're trying to do is not only remove the heavy, visible material, but we're also trying to remove the dissolved material, the material that gets formed in this step. So that way it lowers the disinfection products that are byproducts of the naturally occurring material in the water, but also the byproducts of when those molecules that are disinfecting start breaking down the molecules of the suspended material. And it goes in here and they get absorbed out and biologically eaten by beneficial bacteria. Then after that, we hit it again with some more chlorine to make sure that anything that carries through is gone. You see it's 0. And then it goes out in our distribution system. So a large portion of it goes directly to your taps. Some of it, the unused portions, go into the Great Notch Reservoir, New Street Reservoir, and the Rhine Reservoir. And you can see that the bacteria levels start jumping up again. And that is really the key to this whole entire project, is making these stay at this. And this is just for instance, here's the Point View Reservoir, and the Point View Reservoir is a wild reservoir. It's a raw water reservoir. It's water that comes out of the river that, it's just open, natural, untreated. And you can see that even the Great Notch gets higher than that, and they're almost about the same. I mean, theoretically, they're pretty close to the same. So that's what we're trying to do. This is the heart of everything, right here. Oh, do it again. And this is just a list of the pathogens that we they're the general names. This is like the genus names. The real, doggone it. There's many different species, subspecies of these that we have to deal with, and we in fact detect in the raw water, and we also detect some of these things in these reservoirs. Now, people will say about cryptosporidium and that sort of thing. Well, who got it, who doesn't? It's difficult to really pin that down. These are, to prove one way or another. But it's not just cryptosporidium, it's all these other things that you find in here. And in particular, this group right here is the ones that you really are concerned about. And this is just a list of things that we've actually, and you can see here, you can see here the things like Enterobacters and that type of thing. These we found at people's faucets. And most of them are under the influence, most of these that we isolate are under the influence of these reservoirs. And this is why we're so interested in this project. This is it right here. And just to go through, these are just things that we actually isolated from the distribution system. Now, okay, we can go through there. Now, the reason why the reservoirs present such a problem is because besides the reintroduction of these types of bacteria and other things, you also picked up suspended material. You have algae growing in there, you have things washing off from the sides. You know, these reservoirs are not like big, like tanks or pools that are sticking up out of the ground. They're actually made from natural land that was dammed so that water can flow into it. And that's a problem. And when they get more turbid, when the clarity of the water starts to drop, you introduce these algal cells and just suspended material that actually can shield the bacteria and the pathogen. So you want to remove them, but you can't now. Now it's coming straight out there. We add chlorine, and think about it, we have one barrier. Previously, we had 5 barriers. Now we have one shot at it. We get it wrong, somebody could possibly get sick. It's a risk, and it's a real risk. The other problem is, and we've talked about this many times, and I'm sure Eddie will have something to say about it, but the issue of lead. Once you have these open finished water reservoirs, it's difficult for us to add corrosion inhibitors. The corrosion inhibitors are generally phosphates. And the phosphates, as you know, when you put on your lawn, makes your lawn nice and green. Well, when we put it in the water, it makes the water in these open reservoirs green. And then we run into that whole problem where you get turbidity and actually you get green water complaints and that sort of thing. So it's always concern. So it makes it difficult to put these inhibitors. Remember, the water doesn't, when it comes from the plant, it doesn't contain lead. The lead comes from the dissolving of the piping materials in your houses, in your faucets, in the pipes leading into your house and that sort of thing. What we want to do is add these inhibitors that coat the insides of these pipes so that you don't get that dissolution. And that's what one of the other issues that we want to do, the reason why we want to do it, so we can add it to all of our entire system. Right now we cannot. We only small portions of our system actually get it. I'm going to have Kevin, he's our project manager on this, and he'll give you the timelines and that sort of thing. Right?
And Kevin, if I can ask if you could do it in kind of speed up format, and no offense, Joe, but we have a lot of people, and I suspect some of them may want to make some comments this evening and like to leave time for that.
I always talk too long on this. It's my favorite.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Clicker. Okay, Joe gave you the rundown basically on why we're proceeding with the project now, and obviously it's overwhelmingly because of the public health concerns. What I'm going to just do here now briefly is just give you what we're doing, where we're at this point, what they came up with in the feasibility of this study when they came up with the preliminary design, and where we stand right now as far as what the DEP agreed, and we agreed with the DEP how we were going to proceed with. So I just want to make everybody sure that we're on the same page. So real quickly, the timeline, won't even bother going through too quick, but just so you know, it started in 2003 when they drafted it. Comment period, and then 2006 it was finalized. We had until April 1st, 2009. Of course, we didn't meet that deadline. We went into an ACO with the state on March 30, 2009, which basically gave us an extension because the federal drop dead date was July 1st, 2012, which we're long past that. So just so you know, we basically, oh lovely. August 24th, 2012, the DEP finally approved the approach that we came up with. We made an amended ACO after the feasibility was executed May 15th, and then we had July 1st of this year deadline for the documents. Okay. That's going the wrong way. Real quick, and I guess the thing you're mainly concerned with, obviously, is the Line Reservoir. We did, there's three parts of this first phase. Backup power at our plant in Little Falls, which is key, which allows us to drop down the volume of water we have to store. Another 2 million gallon tank, which is basically going to be awarded within the next month or so in Verona. But bottom line, at Levine, 2.5 million gallon tanks, access road, piping, water quality, utility bill, and stormwater improvements. That's the guts of what they proposed. The compliance schedule as it stands before, right now, we were supposed to be getting started mid-2015, but we already have had a 3-month extension with the state, and so that's probably going to be pushed back, honestly. Just for Levine, yes. And just so people who aren't that familiar with it, this is the aerial photo of Levine. And like I'm saying, this is just basically what we have come up with in the feasibility study and the conceptual design. So this is Levine now. This is Levine now. It was basically a rock that was excavated out of a rock basin back in 1885. And it was used to store water since then. The proposed plan, then, these are the two infamous tanks that we're talking about, 2.5 million gallon tanks that we're pushing quite far back from Grand Street, and hopefully be able to, keep them as far as we can and visible from any residents. And one thing too, I know Dave Sue's here or whatever, he brought up the other night, he was concerned about future park. The National Park Service, actually, we're not in the National Park, but it will be bordering it, and it looks like there's plenty of ways that we could screen it from that if that ever does come to fruition. Let's proceed. That's how it would look like after a storm. Those are stormwater retention basins. And here, just real quickly, like I said, you can only see Levine Reservoir right now, basically, from the entrance on Levine, an intersection of, Grand Street and New Street. So that's what it looks like now. You basically see the reservoir there with the tanks. You'll see them, they'll be back there. And that's before we put any screening in. Along Reservoir Road, which is on just to the west of it, this is how it looks now. And that would be how it looked in the future, once again, without any screening for the most part. This is looking up Grand Street from across from the International High School, and it won't be visible from there at all. And this is the Wayne Avenue extension down by the Great Falls, and the location of the tanks is up behind this ridge up here. So there was a concern, but it's basically be physically impossible to see it from the Great Falls viewing area where everything is. Okay, and we're going to go into, Jerry's going to jump in a second, show us what we did after the fact. We looked into different alternatives, but even in the feasibility study, we looked into these aspects of it. I won't go too much. Treatment, floating cover, off-site storage. Bottom line, the water storage tanks became, by far, because we're concerned about cost and everything, and even though it's a very, very big project, $135 million, it is far and away the cheapest alternative, if you can believe that, as far as the money goes, saying $135 million. And with that, I'm going to give it to Jerry, who's going to just, I think, quickly run through, after the fact, after the first couple of meetings we had with the public, we looked at some we wanted to re-review the feasibility study to make sure that it was still valid, and also to look at some other alternatives. All right, Jerry.
And Jerry, I'm also going to ask you to be super quick, if you can.
No kidding.
Okay, my name is Jerry Nottingham with CH2M Hill. We're the design engineers on this storage tank project. We didn't do the original feasibility study. By the way, our partners are Hatchmont, McDonald, Paul Paparello is here. He can answer some questions on that. But we were asked by the commission to re-review the Thailand report that was produced in 2010, and I'm going to briefly get through that as quickly as possible. As I said, Thailand International did the original feasibility study in 2010. What they were asked to do is develop objectives, look at the physical conditions of the entire system, evaluate options, define assessment criteria, evaluate alternatives, and select something or make a recommendation for selection to Passaic Valley. They were supposed to identify a plan that would bring the water system into compliance, meet the DEP requirements as defined in the ACO, and provide a preferred alternative. They evaluated power, water supply, interconnections, storage reservoirs, treatment, plant operations, reliability, and the required level of service. And reliability is very important when you evaluate these alternatives because there's different ways that you can do this, but providing safe, potable drinking water is about reliability. You need to do it every day under all conditions. You need to consider fire flows and issues like that. So that was a critical, important element. So the things they looked at is treatment at the reservoirs, cover and lining the existing reservoirs, new storage tanks, some backup power, and combinations thereof. They applied a disciplined, structured decision-making approach, basically got together with staff, regulators in one way or another, and looked at the industry standards on how to deal with these type of issues, weighted some criteria, and eventually made some decisions on what the best approach would be. And we'll just get through this very quickly. You need to be able to provide 100 million gallons of water a day, so that was a critical element of the system. And you also needed to stay within the boundary conditions. There's various pressures throughout Patterson and the distribution area. You need to be cognizant of that upon the selection, because if you put in the wrong solution, you could blow apart the pipes and the distribution system in your streets, and there'd be a lot of water main breaks and issues like that, so they needed to look at that. So this was in order of importance, the important criteria they looked at. Obviously, water quality, public health was most important, reliability, the ability to operate, level of redundancy, those types of things, regulatory acceptance, does it meet the letter of law in terms of regulations, and ultimately whether it could be constructed. They looked at treatment alternatives. Membrane treatment was considered but eliminated because of the very high flows, additional backup power. You'd still have an open finished water reservoir that Joe alluded to earlier that you would have you'd have corrosion inhibitor in and would utrify, and it was a very high capital cost for membranes of $210 million, and that was in 2010 dollars, and we updated those a bit, which I can share with you. They also looked at UV disinfection. That was thrown out for high O&M costs, backup power, the inability to add phosphorus corrosion inhibitor because it would go back into the reservoir, and issues like that. The remaining alternatives there were 8 of them. They evaluated those based on those criteria, and the selected alternative was replacing the reservoir with storage tanks and provide backup power at the Little Falls Water Treatment Plant. Our review of this was, and we're reviewing a report by Thailand. We assessed the feasibility, looked at the criteria, and adjusted treatment costs where necessary. And our findings were, we found a process for defining, evaluating, and weighting criteria was appropriate. It was the standard of the industry. We concurred with the report that UV membranes are not as safe, secure, and reliable as covered storage tanks. And the reason is there's a whole lot more moving parts. Covered storage tanks basically take this high quality water that's been treated at the plant at a reasonable cost, but a high cost, recontaminates it, and then you retreat it again. It wasn't the way to go. So liners and covers are less reliable, less safe, require more maintenance. And I'm rushing through this. If you have questions of myself or Paul, we certainly would answer these. But the selected alternative, in our opinion, was it's the most safe, secure, reliable, cost-effective solution which meets the boundary conditions that we talked about, the water quality goals, and improves the system resiliency. Another thing we were asked to do, and I'll get through this hopefully even more quickly, is the Levine site the only site? So we looked at some alternative sites. We were asked to do that. And there were 3 sites evaluated. Site 1 is Block 5103. It's a former quarry in Patterson. We looked at site number 2, which is across the street, on this street across the street from site 1. And then finally, site 3, which is formerly the Vistas at Great Falls as alternate sites for these tank locations. To give you an idea what that looks like, here's Levine, here's the Vistas over here, here's site number 2, here's site number 1. So there's a proximity to Levine. We're supposed to look at it, evaluate some of the land use issues, geotechnical, and develop conceptual plans for that, which we did. Okay, I pressed the wrong button. Here we go. We also prepared cost estimates for construction and estimated the impact. And I'll go through this quickly. So we looked at the various sites. Site 1, the former quarry, it wasn't large enough to accommodate 2 tanks of the proposed side. There was a lot of grading and rock excavation that would be required to construct the tanks and various other stormwater management appurtenances, and some other issues that we can talk about, but I'm trying to get through this quickly. There were no major water transmission lines that were anywhere near this site. The closest ones were about a half a mile away, so you'd have to install some really large inlet and outlet 36-inch pipes along with a 30-inch pipe, and it would require crossing, either cutting through or micro-tunneling under Route 80. Here's basically some of the things that we talked about: the pipelines, the tanks at Site 1, and its connection to the existing water system and the overflow going out to Levine. Topography was non-conducive. This is what it would look like. The conclusion, it's not a viable alternative. It wasn't determined to be favorable, but we ran some costs on what it would cost to build it regardless. Site 2, and I'm really going to run through this, 2 small, steep slopes, ran a price on this as well, and we'll let you look at that. It's basically the same general alignment. That was Site 1, here's 2. There are those long pipelines, and there's actually 3 of them in there. You're only seeing 1 there. Topographic considerations, we thought it wasn't viable. We worked up a price anyway. Site 3, former location of warehouses, Vistas at Great Falls, we talked about that. The grade there wasn't as bad as the other sites. As a matter of fact, it is at a high elevation, but it was something that you could probably get the tanks on and all the additional information. And I'll skip through that. And this is that 3rd site, pipe work, tapping into the existing pipelines and so forth. Topography, it's potentially a suitable alternative due to location, site, elevation. You still have pipeline consideration, stormwater management, so we ran a cost on this as well. Historic approvals, historic preservation authorization, you have to go through the process. Someone brought up last time that Site 1, because of Morris Canal, a lot of it is under Route 80, but it still will require determination. Site 2, Site 3 as well. You'll need Federal 106 review. It's not going to take authorization, but because of it's being federally funded and because it's in a preservation area, it will require some evaluation. So all of the alternatives will have some state and federal historic considerations. The other consideration, I'm going to cover this because this is really important. The Levine Reservoir is really an open, finished water reservoir. There's no river running into it or anything running out of it. It's not like a natural reservoir that's fed. Its only source of water is the treated water coming from the Little Falls Water Treatment Plant. That's why it's there. That's why it exists. It has for quite some time. But once you take it out of the system for any of these alternate sites, what you'll have is this open Levine Reservoir will dry out on you. So it needs to be decommissioned, and something else needs to take place in order to keep it vital, otherwise it will dry out on you. You'd have to run some additional water into it and have the water come out of it. And I think the mayor was talking a little bit about his ideas on that. And I don't mean to say it simple, but there are a lot of considerations due to elevations and so forth on why that would be challenging, but it can be done perhaps. And let's see what we got. We're going to run to the cost. Levine is going to run $18,700,000 approximately. Site 1 is $41 million. Site 2 would be $37, and probably the most encouraging might be Site 3, and that's $34 million. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Jerry. And we're almost at the point where we're going to go to the audience. We have probably no more than a 5-minute presentation by my colleague Alan Weinberg from NJCDC about a little bit of a different view of this, and then we're going to go right to the audience. But if you'll forgive me, what I neglected to do at the outset, I'd like to introduce to you 3 commissioners. The Passaic Valley Water Commission is actually governed by a 7-member board of commissioners. They are public servants who dedicate a lot of their time to making these important decisions, and I'd like to acknowledge them. At the table from Passaic, Commissioner Menachem Bazian, thank you for being here. Right up here from Patterson, Commissioner Jeff Levine. Jeff, thank you for being here. And also, she was here, is Commissioner Crystal Cleaves still here? I'm not sure if she's still here, but she was here. Let's thank them for coming out. I'd also just like to acknowledge a few elected officials who have taken the time to come out. First, in the far corner, the Mayor of Woodland Park, Keith Kasmark. Thank you, Keith, for being here. From the City of Patterson, Councilman Andre Saya. I saw Andre. And I see in the back there the Assemblywoman from the 35th Legislative District, Shavonda Sumter. Thank you, Shavonda, for being here. Alan? We have 2 commissioners from the Patterson Board of Education, Manny Martinez and Flavio Rivera. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Bob, and I will be very brief because I know folks want to make a statement, but my name is Alan Weinberg. I'm with the New Jersey Community Development Corporation, and we've been following this along with the Board of Realtors for some time now, and we want to share, our concerns about where we are in the process and how I think we can move forward. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So real quick, why are we involved? What are the alternatives? What are the impacts and the next steps? So in terms of why we're involved, I'm not going to repeat this, but we all know these 3 open-air reservoirs that are being required by the EPA to be decommissioned or covered, or a variety of other resources because of microorganisms. Why it's important to us at the Levine Reservoir is we serve 2,000 young people each and every day right here at the Stanley Levine Reservoir in our greater Great Falls Promise neighborhood. On the next slide, what a lot of people in this room should know is that a tremendous number of elected officials and NJCDC and community leaders have worked incredibly hard over the past 2 decades to really utilize our water resources. And you can see there the inauguration of the Great Falls National Historical Park, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but that is a crowning achievement for our neighborhood and something that's going to be incredible, and this project borders on it. On the next slide, you're going to see the tanks as they show them, but the things you need to know is that this is inside the Great Falls Historic District, and so I'm sure people will comment later about how presidents went out of their way to create a historic district and to maintain its integrity. But in addition to that, we have the nation's newest national park, and there's a general management plan that's being developed right now for what that park can be. None of us in this room can appreciate how amazing that park will be 20 years from now and look so different, and we certainly want to take into consideration the idea of putting these tanks in here. And I should clarify, if I read this correctly, having read the feasibility report, that the water that you see in the final picture is actually not necessarily water. I believe it's a retention basin, which is sort of like the thing you see at the mall that fills up with water when it rains. So it's not going to look like water most of the time. It's going to look like a ditch and the tanks. On the next slide, just really quick, you have to get a sense of what happened here. The DEP was really moving them quickly to solve this. So if you read the first thing, it says they have to meet stringent requirements on schedule. If you look at the feasibility study, it says the public involvement portion will be addressed during the conceptual phase of the project. The reality is that 6 years into the project, just this week was the first public meetings on this project. And that is, sorry. And that's not really acceptable. And I think what's really more galling is that even though we're hearing from folks, and the Passaic Valley Water Commission has put a lot of information on the web and have worked together now in the last month or so in a better spirit of cooperation, but the plans for the designs that you see are already complete. They're 100% designed at Levine Reservoir, and so that's of concern, because our job shouldn't be just to pick the paint colors and pick the trees. We should be in the early part of the process, as you'll see on the next slide. So what do we believe other communities have done? Well, the first one, underground tanks. Here's an example in Wilmington, where on the left, this is an open-air reservoir with clean drinking water, and on the right, they moved the drinking water underground to underground tanks, and they kept their reflecting pool, which is accessible to the public, and a park. Now, I'm not saying we should do that, but we should consider that. We should consider alternative locations, although recently, the Passaic Valley Water Commission, in response to public comments, has done that. We should consider decommissioning and really understanding what that means. That means basically taking it out of the water system and not spending the money that we talked about, and what that means to reliability. We should have that conversation. We should talk about UV treatment. We should talk about floating covers, although in the report it did say it was more expensive. It's something we should all be aware of. We should talk about a shared treatment plan, which is something they're talking about for Great Notch. We should talk about, as the mayor artfully put it, waiting until 2016 when the LT2 rule finally gets reviewed, and we don't want to be the first ones to rush in and spend all our money before that happens. So these are the alternatives that we should sit down when the mayor says a charrette and really look at. There's a historic 106 review, as I'm sure many people will talk about today. This is in the Great Falls National Historic District. This is a protected district, and in order to build something like giant concrete tanks, you do have to do a 106 review. The reason they do a 106 review, for those of you who may not know what a 106 is because way back when they knocked down Penn Station in New York, which was beautiful, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis created the National Environmental Protection Act and said, maybe we should talk to the public before we do things. And obviously, a lot of people might be fans of Madison Square Garden, but there were a lot of people who thought the old Penn Station was actually pretty nice. So the whole idea of the 106 review is to get people's input and make sure this is the only way to do it. Our final concern is around project cost. The budget was $80 million, it was $90 million, now it's $135 million without financing or escalation from delays, not regular escalation. Revenue has increased 73% in the last 9 years. The Passaic Valley Water Commission's capital budget, which in 2008 was just $69 million, is now $191 million, which when you just look at those numbers, you know what's going to happen along the rate line. You don't have to be really a genius to figure that out. And so what does that mean? That means that in the Van Abs report, which is a significant Rutgers report, the Passaic Valley Water Commission has only been spending $2 million a year for cleaning and fixing lines that are hundreds of years old. And instead, what this report says is now by putting all their money into this project, it'll be hard to do the general upkeep of the 100-year-old lines and replacing those that need to be done. This is their report and this is their concern. And then finally, this one shows specifically for Patterson, these are the 23 CSO communities. Really quick, CSO is a combined sewer system. Patterson is one of the few communities that has a combined water sewer system, which means the sanitary sewer from your toilets and the water from the street all go into one pipe. And when it rains too much, it overflows and it goes out into the Passaic River. And the DEP has a mandate that that can happen. And so when you look at the 23 CSO communities, which we'll get to in a minute, Patterson pays the second highest amount out of its pocketbook for a percentage of median income for water bills. So of these 23 urban areas, we have the second highest water bill as the percent of median income, and this is only going to make it go up. Finally, and I think you need to consider this as a whole, and this is probably the most critical slide, in addition to the $135 million that will potentially significantly increase water rates, you also have the long-term combined sewer outflow plan, which is coming down the pike for Patterson alone. And that is being projected to be $175 million alone. So as a Patterson resident, you need to be concerned that these are happening together. Meanwhile, more needs to be done on lead pipes itself. Although the Passaic Valley Water Commission does make a good point in that closing the reservoirs will allow more phosphate, which will improve lead in the water, but we also need to replace the pipes themselves. And then Passaic Valley flood control. So our point is that we need to slow down. We need to stop and engage the public and ratepayers in a meaningful way, and that is exactly what the mayor said, and we wholeheartedly agree. So I'm going to turn this back over to Bob. Just wanted to give you our 5-minute version of where NJCDC believes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I also neglected to introduce two other individuals who have come tonight and who deserve our appreciation, public officials from the Department of Environmental Protection, Mr. Fred Sickles and Ms. Karen Fell. They're seated over there. Thank you for coming out this evening. Let's give them a hand. We are now going to have public comment. I have a sign-in sheet with me. The first speaker is someone who has been in the forefront with NJCDC of calling for public hearings, the president of the Passaic County Board of Realtors, Mr. Bill Linteris.
Thank you, Bob. I'll be brief here. Good evening. My name is Bill Linteris. I'm president of the Passaic County Board of Realtors. A little over a year ago, Passaic County Board of Realtors made a decision to become actively involved in attempting to save the Levine, Great Notch, and New Street reservoirs. For many reasons, including lack of public awareness with the plan to drain the reservoirs and replace them with concrete tanks, the possibility of increased water rates and loss of scenic views and decreased property values. I would at this time like to thank Mayor Torres, Assemblywoman Sumner, and Councilman Syed for coming and supporting the cause here. Before I make my statement, I'd like to again say thank you. Raising concerns with opposing the Passaic Valley Water Commission's plans and replace the reservoirs with concrete tanks, the support is really appreciated. For the residents living near these reservoirs, and on behalf of Passaic County Board of Realtors, I thank you for taking a stand. One may ask why Passaic County Board of Realtors became involved in this issue. The draining of these three reservoirs and replacement with concrete tanks will have an impact not only on the two communities where they are located, Patterson and Woodland Park, but all the communities who receive water. Realtors are deeply involved in the communities they work and live, where they work and live in, because we understand that the characteristics of a community is what makes people want to move to a town. These reservoirs have become part of the character of Patterson and Woodland Park, and their replacement with concrete tanks would greatly change the nature of these towns in a way that's irreversible. Going back to the history on this issue, the plan to drain these three reservoirs and replace them with concrete tanks was approved in 2012. And while in a public session there was very little public involvement and no outreach sessions prior to the plan's passage, Passaic County Board of Realtors was not aware of this issue until Woodland Park Mayor Keith Kasmark brought it to our attention in 2013. While this plan was done in response to an EPA mandate, that same mandate also provided other alternatives, such as treating the water. In addition, this mandate is currently under federal review. Over the last few months, beginning this past April, Passaic County Board of Realtors, along with other groups, including the NJCDC, and local residents began attending the Passaic Valley Water Commission meetings. as a way to raise questions and concerns about this project and raise public awareness. Over 20 municipalities in the Passaic Valley Water Commission coverage area have passed resolutions raising concerns about this plan, and several newspaper articles and editorials have run as well. In addition, there are now close to 1,000 signatures on a petition begun by Passaic County Board of Realtors. Since Passaic County Board of Realtors involvement began, we have started to see more public involvement, and with the help of the Njcdc and Mayor Kasmark, possible alternatives are being considered. The Commission is considering off-site tank locations that would preserve the Levine Reservoir. Passaic County Board of Realtors believes this is a positive step that should be seriously considered, as should water treatment, not just for the Levine Reservoir, but also for the Great Notch and New Street reservoirs. Really, all options should be explored. On behalf of Passaic County Board of Realtors, I thank the NJCDC for holding this meeting so members of the public can have their say regarding the plans to drain the reservoirs and replace them with concrete storage tanks. One other thing that Mayor Torres did before he left is he asked me to bring to the attention of the people here today the towns that have signed resolutions delaying draining the reservoirs. The County of Passaic, Bloomingdale, Cedar Grove, Elmwood Park, Fairfield, Fairlawn, Garfield, Haledon, Harrison, Hawthorne, Lincoln Park, Little Falls, Lodi, North Caldwell, North Haledon, Nutley, Prospect Park, Ringwood, Riverdale, Totowa, Wallington, Wanacue, West Milford, West Orange, and Woodridge. On behalf of the Passaic County Board, I'd like to thank the NJCDC for holding this meeting so members of the public can have their say. That is so important. Lastly, I urge the Commission to consider other alternatives to save all three reservoirs, such as off-site locations or water treatment that will preserve these reservoirs while continuing to provide quality water in an affordable manner. That will not have an adverse impact on property values of those living near the Levine, Great Notch, and New Street reservoirs. I'd like to also say there are signs available in the back of the room, and that the Passaic Valley Water Commission meeting that was listed as 12 o'clock on Wednesday has now been changed to 10:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Our next speaker is Manny Martinez.
I'm going to be very brief because I know it's been a long evening, but to each and every one of you who came out here tonight, I applaud you for taking a stand. To the contingency at the Passaic Valley Water Commission, while I really do appreciate your presentation here this evening, and I understand the intent behind it, respectfully, I feel that in a lot of ways, it was a lot of uptalk and a lot of use of scientific terms to really distract us from the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is this. From the onset of this process, it was very much skewed. The fact that this went on for years, and there was no solicitation of public involvement, no solicitation of public opinion, and this amount of $150 million, roughly, is just going to be thrown on us without even considering our opinion. I think right there it just completely disqualifies any attempt that you guys are making. This district, this neighborhood, is very special and unique in that this is one of the only few places where the historical meets the natural. And any attempt to skew that, any attempt to remove what we have here with the onset of this national park will not be tolerated. This is a national historical park, and what you guys are trying to do is going to taint and skew what we have worked years to finally establish. So again, I appreciate your intent behind what you're doing, but it was handled incorrectly from the onset. And the outpouring of people here today is a demonstration that it's not going to be tolerated and it's not going to happen. Thank you.
I'd like to give Mayor Keith Kasmark an opportunity to say a few words. Please welcome the Mayor of Woodland Park, Keith Kasmark.
Good evening, and let's hear it for Bob and NJCDC for holding this event tonight. I will be brief, as I had the opportunity to attend the hearing at International High School last week, and I want to say that Woodland Park is committed to the fight. We have a national park within the borders of the city of Paterson to protect, and we have historic Garrett Mountain to protect as well. These reservoirs being drained and replaced with concrete storage tanks are going to affect the historic value and the aesthetic beauty of this landscape, and quite frankly, we are not going to tolerate it. We have all those towns that the realtors mentioned who have passed supporting resolutions to fight this project. The reason those mayors and councils came around and made the determination that this was in the public's best interest was because everyone throughout the service area will be affected by increased water rates to pay for a $135 million project. That, coupled with reduced property values, both in this area of Paterson and throughout the Rifle Camp Road area in Woodland Park, and to be capped off by the fact that our Passaic County Board of Chosen Freeholders just adopted a comprehensive open space master plan to improve the parks to rival those in Bergen and Essex counties. And they have started off with beautiful Gothelbrook Park in Hawthorne, and will soon be moving to make those same types of improvements at Garrett Mountain Reservation at Rifle Camp Park. The entranceways to both of those parks are the two reservoirs in my town. The aesthetic value of that landscape will forever be scarred if this project goes through. And I will tell you that we stand with the people of Paterson in making sure that this area and this landscape does not become scarred for eternity. On a positive note, at the end of the meeting at International High School, I want to thank Executive Director Bella from the Water Commission for giving my residents hope that as far as the Great Notch Reservoir goes, that there will be a concerted effort on the part of the Commission to move forward with trying to work with the City of Newark. For those of you who don't know, the Great Notch Reservoir and the Ridge Road Reservoir in Cedar Grove do interconnect, and there is the possibility that they can work in conjunction with one another to save the Great Notch Reservoir. That was encouraging, and what was also encouraging is I received a letter today at the mayor's office indicating that we will be meeting as a governing body, the Woodland Park Mayor and Council, with the Commission on October the 6th, so that we can start to provide the public input that is so very necessary as they plan for the remaining phases of this project. So I thank you for coming out tonight. I thank you for keeping the fight. I look forward to working with the commissioners and their professionals in trying to come up with the right solution, both for the people of Paterson and the people of Woodland Park. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Sarai Perez.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarai Perez. I am a former Great Falls Youth Corps member, and basically what we do is we give tours around the Great Falls, and we also work on children's programs to educate children about the park and the history and why it is important to Paterson. We also focus on landscaping, and we do planting, and we basically clean up the litter that is around the park. Mary Ellen Kramer Park has been under construction for about a year to beautify the park. There's a lot of interest in the historic district, and this interest is not in concrete tanks. How will this impact our new national park? Thank you.
Eddie Gonzalez.
Well, first, I want to thank everyone for taking out their time to come here today. It was a lot of work trying to get the advertisement out, which we did to Paterson, West Paterson, in partnership with other organizations. I just hope that the PVWC would have done it, because I get a bill in my mail every month, and I did not see a flyer come to my home about any of the public community forums. So I thank you for coming. My name is Eddie Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for the NJCDC. And someone had asked me, why are you so upset about this project? Well, let me ask Mr. Bell a question. And this is not a personal attack because these individuals are doing a great job. They believe in what they're doing, but because there's mandates, they feel that they're instructed to continue with this project. But I don't think Mr. Bella would appreciate if someone was building concrete tanks in front of his house. And they propose a plan that they gave you a lot of beautiful statistics and numbers and, you know, why it's important to do this. But this is, like my colleague said, this is 100% done as far as the design and the feasibility study. How many of you had input into this project? Zero. There's many alternatives that we can consider. The mayor gave his ideas on connecting the raceways. Why wasn't that part of this project? It could have saved us a lot of money if we had to do this. But there's also another option, doing nothing, decommissioning the Lavine Reservoir. Therefore, we don't have to spend the amount of money that they say we do. $135 million that they don't have money for. That's going to come out of the ratepayers' pockets. And that's unjust. I can't afford that. I know a lot of my colleagues can't afford that. And they haven't even spoken about the other projects that are coming down the pipeline, which is the sewer system. There's going to be a $175 million project on that you're going to have to pay for as well. Okay? Why don't they fix the lead issue? And Joe Bella referenced my name because lead is a problem. I was a former commissioner on the Board of Education, and I realized when I did my walks through the school buildings, there's a lot of schools that don't have water fountains operating because there's a lot of lead in the water. Now that leads to issues, dysfunctional learning, etc. for our children. Maybe that relates to why our children are not doing so well in school. Have there been any studies on that? Why can't we fix the lead problems and fix the pipes underneath the roads? If I'm going to spend $200 million, fix my roads so I can put my water, my mouth under the faucet so I can drink clean water. I spend more money on bottled water than I do on any of the bills that I have. This project does nothing for the city of Woodland Park, Patterson, and any other city that is under the Passaic Valley Water Commission. They say that there's microorganisms that can get you sick. From what other reports have stated, is about 50 in the history of this whole project of having Lavine and other projects in the state of New Jersey, about 50 incidences. And what happened? You get the runs, maybe you have to use the bathroom a little bit more often for like a day or two. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Okay? You can get more sick by someone who calls across the room from you. Okay? So we have to put this into perspective. Now, I'm not a scientist, but at the end of the day, we just changed Pluto from being a planet to now being a star, to be a star. So in 2016, the DEP can come back and say, we don't have to do this. Okay? So let's stick together. There's a lot of us that are anxious to get this project stopped, and I think that, you know, tonight it's a great example of the city of Patterson and local residents that care about this project. So thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Before I call the next speaker, Joe, just to clarify, the meeting on Wednesday, public meeting, the website says 10:30, but is it actually at noon? Is that correct?
Actually, the business meeting will be, I think, at noon.
Okay.
Right? 10:30 ethics training. Yeah, right, I got it.
Okay.
Regular meeting is at...
So the regular meeting, just to clarify everyone, is in fact at 12 noon at the Water Commission's headquarters. Our next speaker is Jim Coos.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Coos. I live at 616 Rifle Camp Road across from the reservoir. And the reason why I bought my house is because it was such a beautiful area, is because of that reservoir. Second of all, I don't know how this got so far. This reminds me of, this project is already done. To me, this is like a form of communism. Second of all, if they filtered the water one time, why can't they filter it again coming out for the second time? And they don't have to close up all these reservoirs. What else I got? and I'm willing to support this project not going through, and I'm willing to put money up to do it. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Gina DeRoche.
I would like to thank all of the officials who attended the meeting tonight. It really is heartening to see our public officials involved in this project, especially since it's been 6 long years that this project has been underway and totally kept from the public, which raises serious issues of credibility about the decisions that the commissioners made, even though they did engage in debate about whether or not to bring this before the public. But repeatedly, their decision was no. Recently, very recently, the Passaic Valley Water Commission posted on their website 8 years of executive minutes, private minutes that nobody has been privy to. And in these minutes, interestingly enough, they, among themselves, refer to the fact that it's the State Department of Environmental Protection that is applying the pressure to them to select these wonderful, gigantic concrete tank farms. So one has to really ask the question, why is the State Department of Environmental Protection applying pressure to the Passaic Valley Water Commission to select a particular option? Especially since the federal EPA has put forth 3 different options, 2 of which are sort of absurd. All of which leads us to the point, you have to follow the money. You have to follow the money. $135 million is a lot to me. But if you look at the budget that was up here on the screen, $135 million is a chunk of change to the commission, but it doesn't impact them the way it's going to impact us. Perhaps someone raised this at the meeting last week. Perhaps somebody at the State Department of Environmental Protection has a cousin in the concrete business. Don't laugh. The newspapers are filled with those stories all the time. And remember who we're dealing with? About 10 years ago, a 12-year hydrochemist at the Clifton Passaic Valley Water Commission was murdered by throwing her into one of these wonderful, gigantic concrete tanks. It's very unfortunate that this issue has created an us versus them mentality. So we are looking very, very hopefully to our government officials to lead us in resolving this issue, which so many of us feel so strongly about. Please save our beautiful reservoirs from the bureaucrats. Please save our beautiful reservoirs and explore other alternatives. Thank you.
Phyllis Hornstra.
Good evening. This is the first meeting I've been fortunate enough to attend, so thank you for that opportunity. I'm not a biologist, a civil engineer, environmental scientist, or an attorney, and frankly, it would have helped this evening if I had been all of those things. The information is very technical, but I'm only here because I'm a member of the community. I live in Woodland Park. I live close to the reservoir in our community, and I'd like to see it each day when I pass it. It's not just one reason why I think it should remain as it is today. It's not the taxes, the tax differential. It's not just the aesthetics. It's not the habitat for animals and migratory patterns that perhaps will change if the water is removed. It's all of those things. And it's also the lack of transparency with this project and the fact that we as members of the community, whether you live in Patterson, Verona, or in Woodland Park, we haven't had a chance to be a part of this project. And I thank all of you who are working very, very hard to help us be a part of it and be a voice. Thank you.
Ken Wallow.
Good evening. My name is Ken Wallow. I'm the Vice President of the Ivanhoe Artist Mosaic. First, we want to thank NJCDC for getting this meeting together and spearheading this. You guys are doing a great job. We manage the Ivanhoe Wheelhouse, where we are working to jumpstart a revival in the historic district by putting together cultural activities, historic activities, art shows, etc. These tanks are going to go just up the hill from us, and they're definitely going to impact the historical district just when we believe it's on the cusp of getting back to the next level as a cultural and historic center. What I'd like to do is read a letter from our treasurer, Colonel Robert Burrows, who is a seventh-generation Pattersonian, a historian, and as I just said, our treasurer. So here it goes. The project to replace a natural beauty and historic Levine Stony Road Reservoir and the other reservoirs with concrete tanks is the most insidious plan any agency has ever put forth within the city limits of Patterson. The tanks will fulfill some exaggerated regulation run amok. Spending $1.3 million on this Let's Keep It Low project is an insult to us all. There should have been hearings from the time it was thought of. I've written papers and alternative and grassroots methods under the Clean Water Act with the late Congressman Rowe, and I would never have thought of this as an acceptable solution to the problem. To protect drinking water from the natural materials that may cause harm should be done through a filtration system. There are many reasons why this natural and historic reservoir should be preserved as they are. Number one, the Levine Reservoir is adjacent and may become part of the Great Falls National Park, which celebrates the natural beauty and history of American industry. Number two, the sites are rich in Native American sites and artifacts that have never been studied. Trails and campsites dot the area. Number three, there is trace use that this was part of the use of the Morris Canal. This needs more study. And most important, the Lou Costello Pool is adjacent to, and the beauty gives the Patterson youth a break from cityscapes without traveling far. If I were here tonight, I would go into more reasons and look the commissioners in the eye and ask why they would want, if they would want this in their neighborhood, or where would you like to go and enjoy nature's beauty if these were built in front of your house. How you live yourself when you destroy something that can never be replaced. Thank you for hearing me out. Colonel Robert Burrows, 7th generation Patterson and historian. Thank you.
Carol Van Savage.
Thank you. I am a Clifton resident, and I'm also a Realtor. I have a question for the commissioners. Are you comfortable with the amount of public outreach done by staff at the PVWC in the minutes which were, as Gina said, only recently released? You seem to want more, but nothing ever happens. Could you please explain that?
Joe, would you care to respond to that?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but as you will know, and most of you have received flyers every year from us. So for the last, I believe it was since 2010, we've had a paragraph, not even a paragraph, a section of that devoted to what the reservoir said. In addition to that, whenever we were asked to go, we went. I met with Bob, probably the first, actually Bob and CDC were the first people we met with back in 2012 to go through this before we awarded the project, and gave them a tour and explained to us, and in fact, kind of, at the end of the meeting, he asked me one question, and I asked this question all myself all the time, is why didn't we do this sooner? So we had made arrangements to have discussions with them and to have these type of meetings, which for some reason or another didn't happen. But at any rate, here we are, and we're doing everything we can. The one thing that you have to understand, and this is something, and there's no other reason than for public health and public safety. That's what these are about. It's done all through the country, all through Europe, all nations, and have some regulation against having this type of thing, these types of reservoirs. You cannot deny it. That is absolutely necessary. Lead is not an issue that comes from the water. It comes from the pipes, the fixtures in your house, the faucets, those type of things. Without phosphates, it makes it difficult to control that. We know that, and we're doing everything we can. We had a replacement program going on for a very long time where we replaced our lead services for a long time. I'm sorry, I kind of got off subject here. I'm sorry.
Also, are the commissioners stating today that you're 100% certain that the rule requiring this action won't be changed in 2016? And if it may be changed, why wouldn't we try to wait less than the 2 years to see if new technologies may be found that are less intrusive or less costly?
Joe, I appreciate you responding, and if you can do it quickly, that would be great. That's okay.
I won't do that again. That was a political...
It's okay.
The main response to this is, as far as the regulation's concerned, is... I guess it's not working. At any rate, that first slide, every other water utilities, all in the entire country has done away with this. It is very difficult for anybody to back off of that. Now, I can't say that it isn't going to happen. We don't know what will happen politically, that sort of thing. But we do know one thing, that these are important water quality and public safety issues. You can't do away with storage in your system, because you use that storage to help during peak demands, during outages, when we have storms. We had water the entire time during Sandy and Irene, and it was because we had storage. And that's what's important. It's important in all waterworks conventions. Every major system has this type of storage.
Thank you.
All right, and just everybody, please remember, we do have signs here. They're free for you to put up on your lawns. They're very lightweight, and you can do it easily. Thank you for coming.
The next speaker is Tiffany Shepard.
Good evening, everybody. And I just want to thank Bob and the NJCDC for hosting this type of meeting for us. And my question's very simple, and respectfully, if I could just get a yes or no answer, that'd be great. So you've said that you want local input on the project, and that, I don't know, is questionable, considering all of the planning that's already been done without this input. However, even though you are an independent agency, my question is, will you commit to coming before the planning or zoning board here in Patterson, and will you agree to follow their recommendations? Yes or no?
Whatever the law requires us. So I guess that's a yes, right?
Thank you.
The next speaker is Elder Thomas Castrano. Did I say that right? Thomas Castrano. Okay, Frank Blesso.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you going to speak? Oh, I misunderstood. My name is Harry Decker. I have only a few comments. I'm concerned about water stored in concrete tanks. I think there'd be a very possibility of algae blooms and mold growth in concrete tanks. I don't want the drinking water that I'm going to be using stored in these tanks. In addition, there'd be leaching from the concrete tanks, the chemicals into the water. Probably would have to be retreated after storage in these tanks. The other thought is I'd like the commission to take a second look at the quarry on New Street as a possible site for tanks. As you spoke, you need additional piping to run the water from those tanks. I think it would be a lot cheaper to run that water pipeline from the quarry to the New Street Reservoir than spending $130 million plus on these new projects.
Please forgive me, I don't mean any disrespect for having to leave.
Frank Blesso. I used to be the former redevelopment director in Patterson. I've had quite a lot of involvement with the historic district, especially with the raceway system. And I guess, first of all, I don't really see the point in not waiting for the final or for the revised look at the regulations. That just seems so important that rather than move ahead and with a plan that may not be absolutely necessary or may not be able to take advantage of new technology. The point that was just raised was one that I wondered about. I don't know about the chemistry, but at some point we may be reading a report about water being stored in concrete tanks and some kind of problem with that. In terms of, I didn't really want to get into a question and answer period, but Mr. Bello pointed out again about the over 700 facilities, open storage that have been remediated, and I'm just curious, I guess I'm sometimes afraid to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, but of the over 700 that have been remediated, can you tell me a rough percentage of how many went into tanks, how many went into additional filtration, and how many were covered? Do you have any information on that?
It's hard to pin that down, but it's probably under a few percent or for treatment. Everybody built tanks or storage. And, you know, there's plenty of reasons for that, but, the answer to the thing about the mold, these tanks are designed to minimize the amount of time the water spends in there so that you don't have that problem of growth and stuff like that, because the water has chlorine in it as it comes out of the plant. It's the point of the tank is to keep it from the algae growing up and keep the chlorine in the water so you don't have to re-add that again.
Back on Levine situation that, to me, it would seem, my preference would be to really take a serious look at the additional filtration or additional work needed to treat that water again. Everyone wants safe water. There's no question about that. And I think that would be, requires an additional look. Sometimes it may be more costly, but it may end up being the best solution given the historic district, given the national park. And so I think that should be seriously considered. In addition, if another possibility, again, it's been a long time since I had my hydrology course and hydraulics course, but if the reservoir were held at the last meeting at the city council, I think the reservoir is something like 90 million gallons storage.
That's the new street. The Levine is 19.
And to me, given these long periods of drought that we sometimes experience across the nation, it seems like that's a facility that might have an advantage of being retained, even to the point that if the water ends up being pumped back for treatment and then distributed. I don't know how much, if any, water gets distributed now that doesn't go through the 3 reservoirs.
They would have almost no effect on drought mitigation kind of things. They're too small.
Frank, if you could wrap up.
All right. One other final point that I wanted to make, and I was reminded by the gentleman that bought his home across from the reservoir because of the beauty and the attractiveness of it, that again, not to correct Mayor Torres, but the Levine Reservoir has strong historic significance because of it was part of Patterson's first water system. It was, as you know, the predecessor of the Passaic Valley system. The bridge that everybody looks at in photographs carries the pipe that went from that system to the reservoir. In addition, this national park is coming along. It's only in the planning stage. There's going to be more federal money. This is a 20-year plan. One of the elements of the plan is a trail system, not only along the raceway, but the Great Falls is not only one. I think it's Bill Pasquale would tell us it's not only America's only falls and a national park, it's also the only national natural landmark that's in a national park. And part of that landmark is the connection to Garrett Mountain. And the Park Service and the county has been working on a system of walking trails, not only along the raceway, but all the way up to Garrett Mountain, across Route 80, along 2 reservoirs at least. And this is something that is still going to bring, we have to envision the future and the people that are going to come to this park, and they're going to look for that natural beauty, or man-made, in this case, man-made historical beauty.
Frank, if you could wrap up, please.
Yes, and that's my final comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Robin Gold.
Thank you, and I want to thank the CDC and the Passaic County Board of Realtors and their amazing presentation, and also thank the Passaic Valley Water Commission for their presentation. I'm Robin Gold. I'm the Program Director of the Hamilton Partnership for Patterson, a nonprofit organization right here in Patterson. Our office is on Spruce Street, and we're working to enhance the educational, environmental, and economic benefits of the new national park. Our president, Leonard Zaks, wasn't able to join us for this meeting tonight, but he sent me a brief statement that I'll read on his behalf. People in Patterson and the region have been working for decades to create a national park that combines the best of the natural environment with the city's place of supreme importance in the annals of the economic history of our nation. We want it to be the very best park that it can be, and we are very concerned about the proposed construction of a dome or tank over the Levine Reservoir that is located in the National Historic Landmark District right next to the new national park. The effect that such a structure would have on the spectacular views and landscapes would be detrimental to the urban oasis that we are working to establish. I urge this commission to find an appropriate way to avoid harm to the new national park. Thank you.
The next speaker is Edwin Lozada.
How you doing? Edwin Lozada. I just want to touch base on, we've gotten rid of one eyesore over there on that Grand Street. That was the projects. Now we have a high school there for the future of Patterson, which is our youth. Across the street, we talked about the Costello Pool. On your slides, you showed the outside. You didn't show the inside as to how the tanks are going to look from where everyone goes and socializes and swims and spends their summer months. I highly advise that you add some slides to there to show the public in your future meetings of how that's going to look and affect. Thank you.
Elizabeth Gamalor. I probably didn't say that right. Elizabeth Gamellor. No? Yes? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a city, I live in Patterson for many years. I believe you have to rethink what you're doing now. And I agree with most of the people. They all have said what I really would like to happen, to keep looking into something in the technology in the future rather than just, think to do it right away. I don't believe in those projects that you thinking to put it into this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Lydia Robles.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate such a large amount of people who actually came out because they care about this project. My comment and my question is to the water supply expert, Mr. Byron. To my understanding, the Levine currently holds about 19 million gallons of water, and we're going to replace that with 2 containers of concrete that will hold only a fraction of that, 2.5 million gallons each, correct? What would happen if Levine were out of service, as it will be during this construction? How will the system operate during this time?
Kevin? Yeah, Kevin, if you can give a brief response, that would be great. The point to be made is that in the entire project, to drain 3 reservoirs, you'd have 5 million gallons at Levine, 30 million at New Street, and 40 million at Great Notch. So it's a total of 75 million gallons that have to be stored. And I think Lydia's question is, so if you just forgot about the 5, it doesn't seem like that much. And what would happen?
Right.
Correct?
I'm sorry, is that what your question was?
Yes, please.
Good, good. Well, the only thing is, without getting into too many details about it, even though there's 3 different locations, it's almost like there's 3 separate water systems because they're all located at different gradients. Levine is much lower than New Street, which is much lower than the Great Notch. So what happens there is they all serve 3 different areas completely. So the fact that, you think, well, let me just put an extra 5 at New Street, it won't work because I need that water to supply to back up the Levine gradient.
And how will Levine work if those concrete containers are being constructed on Levine Reservoir? How are we going to get the supply that we need from the Levine Reservoir?
That's a very good concern that we've been dealing with all along, and what we're going to have to do there is set up a temporary reservoir in the front during construction, so part of Levine will always be remaining in service even while the construction's going on, because for that very reason, we really need the water at Levine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next speaker is Dave Gilmore.
Good evening. I want to thank, can you hear me? Thank you. I want to thank NJCDC and those that put this meeting together this evening.
Excuse me, Dave, if you want, you can probably just pick up that microphone. I think it'll come off there.
And those that put this meeting together this evening for the public to have input. My name is Dave Gilmore, and I'm president of Let's Save Patterson and a most recent candidate in the past mayoral election, and oftentimes the voice of those that are not heard. And I'm here in that stead this evening. I'm glad to see that the Passaic County Board of Realtors is here. My dad was president of the Board of Realtors 30 years ago. So I'm glad to be here in your company as well. What's not been said is the fact that the cumulative amount of money that's supposed to be paid back by ratepayers, and I think it was $135 million for the reservoir or the containers, and another 170 some odd million for the sewage upgrades. It's $300 million. Well, here again, Patterson is a poor town. We're the largest town, but we're the poorest town. And we can't afford that. Patterson's median income is half that of the state at $33,000 a year. The state means $75,000 a year. And nobody's addressing how much of an impact that's going to have on the poor people that have to pay the money back. That's who we are. That's our community. I read in the paper, and again, let me preface this with Passaic Valley Water Commission, as much as they want to say you're nice guys and gals or whatever, you blew it. You've lost all credibility. All credibility by the statement by your chairperson, Gloria Kolbazike, if that's how it's pronounced, Kolojak, whatever. She said that she didn't want to hear from dissenters or disruptors in the public hearing process. Well, let me tell you something, Ms. Kolojak, or whatever your name is. This country was built on dissenters way back when. We have the right to hear what's going on. We don't have to agree, and I'm certainly not going to agree now because there's something nefarious going on when in fact you don't want to hear from the public. I don't care what you say. It's going to take a whole lot of convincing to bring people to the table to now support what you tried to sneak in 6 years, developing a plan at 100%, and now in the last 12th hour, you want to now come and beg for public support or public interest. We're not having it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ed Wimbush.
Good evening. I'm not an expert on any of the issues that was brought up today, but I do know one thing. If you don't have clean water, no matter what it costs you, you're going to get sick, you're going to die. That's period. However, cost of water is a factor, especially when the water's been privatized. As I said, I'm not an expert, but there is one whom you can contact. Dr. Gary Knoll, he's a nutritionist. He has his offices in Manhattan. He has 2 radio shows. One is on BAI 99.5 FM. He mostly talks about food, problems with food, but he has done a study nationwide on the problem of water in this country in terms of contaminants in it. He's also done a study on the privatization and the devastating effect that it has had on everybody below the middle class. I do know, I have spoken to Native Americans, and they spoke about the devastating effect that the privatization has had on the people of, the Native people of North and South Dakota and in Canada. I also know that the water has been privatized in sub-Sahara Africa for decades. I don't know how many decades. But the cost of water for the very poor is so high for people who make maybe 50 cents a day, they drink out of the gutter and they get sick. So my issue is make sure that our water is not being privatized, that our water is not being diverted from human use to corporate use, because they use a lot of water and they can use other than our drinking water. They don't need our drinking water to do it. You can contact Dr. Gary Knoll at the website BAI, WBAI. You can get him on Progressive Radio when he has his own website. He's expert, I'm not. And he's going to be able to give you a different perspective. Because if you're going for the truth, the only way to get it is to get as many perspectives on any issue as you can. If you take it from just one source on either side of the issue, you're not getting anywhere near the truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to let everyone know, we have 9 more people who have asked to speak. I'm going to impose a 3-minute limit so that we can all be out of here in half an hour. The next speaker is Manuel Gonzalez.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have a couple of questions to ask. First, I would like to see if someone can raise his hand as God Almighty. I know he's not here, but he is here. All right? None of you are God Almighty. Yet you come to destroy what God has created? Well, I think you are. Because for one, having football tanks, that wasn't what God created. God created the oceans. God created the waters. God created all. And for man to manipulate what God has created, you are in the wrong. Now, you come to us telling us how these 2 football fields, or 6 football fields, or domes, are going to help us. Well, I tell you, I've been in Patterson for the past 50 years and I'm still alive. And like my brother here, Eddie Gonzalez, yeah, sometimes you get the runs, and we live with it. And the viruses, it's in the air, it's not so much in the water. You come up with all these bacterias, proven. I'm not a scientist, I'm not from Harvard, Yale, or anything, but I want to ask something. And this will maybe put a big bang on all of you present there. What is the cut that you are getting? And in that terminology, which is what you call barrio talk, what is the cut? What is the bonus? What is the salaries that you are going to get? Or those above you? Or those below you? Because I tell you something right now, Patterson is known to have a lot of unemployment. And I believe that maybe 300 mil could do a lot to Patterson, the people, because there are so many people in Patterson that are so destitute, no jobs, losing their homes, walking away from them because they can't pay no more, okay? How about the families that are living in the streets right now?
Mr. Gonzalez.
I tell you, 300 million can do a lot, all right? As far as the beauty of Patterson, the reservoirs stay as they are. Because you are out to make your almighty dollar any which way you can. We are not going to pay you, and because we can't pay you. Okay? So think about it, analyze it, put it on the table again, and take that, ladies and gentlemen, BS to someone else.
The next speaker is Phil Hegelheimer. Phil Hegelheimer. After that is Melina Gutierrez. Melina Gutierrez. Kelvin Dixon.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank Njcdc for reaching out to everyone and making sure that the people of Patterson and the surrounding areas see what's going on. What I want to say real quick, I'm angry. You all should be angry because this is, and I work in the school system, a form of bullying. That's all this is. It's a form of bullying. They notified no one. They want to take what you got and you sit down and shut up. Not me.
Felicia Rodriguez. Felicia Rodriguez. Richard Barros. Okay. Okay.
What I've been thinking is, okay, you guys said you spread the word or whatever, right? This is the first I've heard of this. And you guys thought, oh, Patterson's a poor town, we're just gonna go in there and we're not gonna tell them anything. Basically, this is a done deal. You just came in here and said, well, they're too stupid to realize what we're gonna do. We're just going in there and use big words that they might not understand. But little do you know, we're poor and everything, but we're gonna fight you to the end. And you thought we wasn't gonna find out. And word spreads, and you know, you guys, you're trying to destroy historical sites, okay? Everything is not about money. You got people here who care, who are gonna fight you to the end. You said you wanted us to know this thing has been rolling for 6 years. So you tell me, with all the money you have, you couldn't reach out to us? You couldn't put newspaper, whatever? Come on, man. You just, basically what you're trying to do is blow smoke up our asses and say they're not going to realize the truth. And that's what basically you're doing. You're going to get a fight. Trust me. You ain't going to take our pockets.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barros. The next speaker is David Sue.
Good evening, David Sue. When I used to be the chairman of the zoning board in Patterson, I had a particular way of asking questions, and it helped me get to the understanding of what we're dealing with. So my first question, and I'd ask everyone associated with the Water Commission, State of New Jersey, contractors, however, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. If you live in Patterson, would you please raise your hand? Very nice. Of the people that are associated with the commission and the state, how many of you would like to have these tanks in your front yard? In the property right across the street from your house? Ms. Fell, you would? Well, across the street. Anybody, would you want it? It's yes or no question. Would you want it?
Well, you know what? We're not really set up for a debate type format, so...
Anyway, so do you believe that if these tanks were put across the street from your home, would it increase or decrease your property values? I don't hear anybody think it would increase your property values?
It's probably a rhetorical question, David, so continue, please.
All right. I think that's about all I have really to say. There's a lot of details and facts that have been spread around, but actually I'm going to say one last thing. They showed us numbers, right? So it's a difference about $22 or so million. If they have a number for doing it, they can do it. So they can move these tanks over to the quarries. They have a number for doing it. They can run a pipe. There's a pipe that runs off of Garrett Mountain to take the runoff all the way to the waterfall. They can do it. It'll just cost more money. But this park is going to mean hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue to this region. $22 million to move the tanks, hundreds of millions of dollars for this region. This is the biggest thing that's happened in this community, and I don't just mean Patterson, in more than 50 years. So let's do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Just have a couple more. Rick Rodriguez.
Good evening. Unfortunately, I found out about this meeting about an hour and a half ago. Ken Wallow from the Ivanhoe said, Rick, something's going down, you should be here. A year and a half ago, I took the then mayor of the city, Jeff Jones, down the Passaic River. And when I saw what was going on the Passaic River, I said, wow, there's a problem. So I shut up and just started doing it. Things. Newspapers nowadays call me the riverman. And part of my biggest concern, there's enough people out there dealing with the chemicals in the water and some of the scientific end of it. My concern as a member of the Board of Realtors from Passaic is that, it's amazing to me that nobody, other than people in Patterson, ever asked questions about buying a house in Patterson. That amazed me. I've never had somebody say, I want to buy a house in Patterson. One of the things that is important to me, two things. One, I want to make the Passaic River a recreation destination for this area so that we don't have to travel 2 and 3 hours to go kayaking and fishing. One of the problems, of course, with people fishing in the Passaic River is, it's got a lot of contaminants. There's other people that are going to handle that. As a realtor, what concerns me is that most times if you have waterfront property, that adds value to your home. I don't think it does that in Patterson. Okay? When I tell people, in fact, I do like this Saturday, I'm going to be doing, which I've been doing now for the last year and a half, I'm doing a boat parade where I invite people that have boats and kayaks and canoes to come down the river. We leave in Elmwood Park and we go to a little island that I've been creating right before Route 46. I can put 100 people on the island. When people are out fishing, kayaking, boating, if it starts raining, I've got canopies they can come hide under. I've got seats and places to take their kids where they don't have to travel too far. And I'm real concerned about water quality because, I don't know if most of you know this, 2 days, for 2 days after it rains, the Passaic River from the Great Falls down to the Dundee Dam in Garfield, you see a lot of crap floating around because of that, the sewer system that they have. For 2 days, basically avoid going into the water and cleaning because I know I'll be cleaning and shit. So whatever can be done to help remedy that situation, the CSO problem, that's a big problem that does have to be remedied. Quality of water, well, when you consider what's going on all over the world, where there's communities that are just going to run out of water. So it's important that whatever's being done should guarantee the continuation of our water supply. Of course, we want it to be as clean as possible, and I don't know the answers. Unfortunately, I wasn't here for the beginning of the meeting, so I really don't know what was said. I didn't have the benefit of the presentation. I wish I would have known about this so I could have come better prepared, and I would have enjoyed hearing what had to be said. But as a realtor, would I want something that's an eyesore? Right now, Patterson is dealing with, it's pretty hard to sell a house. And when you consider that most of the houses that were for sale ended up being short sales, and people have been coming in, the only people that come in from out of Patterson to buy houses are investors that are buying houses for cheap. Okay, and the people who have basically sacrificed their whole lifetime of income to buy a home, they all lost it. From 2006 to over the last 5-6 years, it's a shame. So
if you can just wrap up.
You betcha. So the bottom line is, if you're planning on building something that's going to become negative for the people that live here, that's a problem. It's hard enough to sell your house to begin with. 2, if you've got a real sure-shot way of improving the water quality, and if there's one better than what you have, that should be considered. And also, it'd just be nice to make sure that we find out about these meetings before time so we can be better prepared.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mark Fisher. Is Mark here? Okay. If not, Nicole Ochino.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole. I'm a senior in Patterson High School. I was not born here. I was not raised here. But for the time that I've been here, Patterson is a strong community. How do you expect our community to fight back and know about everything if the meetings are held within the daytime? Half of us are in school, and the other half is working.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the list, but is there anyone here who may not have signed the list who would like to speak? Yes, please come up.
I did sign the list, yes. Thank you for this opportunity that you're allowing me to speak. I have 2 questions. One is for the commission. Why have most of your discussions on this project been in closed session? This is a public project and involves only government agencies. Why so secretive? And will you commit to future meetings and public sessions on this project?
Joe, would you care to commit to additional public meetings on this topic, or something you want to think about?
Would be happy to bring it to the board.
Mr. Bella's response is that he will bring it to the board for whom he works, and you can be sure that there will be plenty of people who will want to convince the board, I think, to continue to have hearings, but that would be their prerogative.
And for the New Jersey DEP, how could you allow the commission to advance this far, completing a feasibility study and 100% design without requiring any public input by the communities affected? Is Governor Christie and the New Jersey DEP Commissioner okay with no public input? Please explain.
Those options were still open, but it is up to them to try to find the most feasible solution to this problem that meets financial, but also hydraulic. There's some things that you talk about nature, there's some things that it's just physically impossible to do. So they have to consider all that. But our role was not to get into that administrative process. However, I have to say is that, and the reason I'm here tonight is, and the reason we were here at the high school, is that we are gauging this public opinion, and I do report to my superiors about
some of these concerns, but our primary objective at the beginning was to make sure that the Passaic Valley Water Commission was proceeding in a way that the federal government, and I'll be honest with you, the analysis we did for public health and safety to do the right thing. I didn't get into just how they were engaging the local public. I was under the impression that I know that they had been working with some local officials and some of the organizations, but that's my stand. But now we're seeing this, and we take this into consideration. But early on, it was just to make sure the technical needs were being met to provide safe drinking water to the region and to meet regional sustainability needs. And you can tell me to leave now, Bob. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Fred. All right. Well, hold on. We'll have, let me just ask if there is anybody else who has not signed up who would care to speak?
How many households were tested to assure that the water that was coming into the system, into the households, were tested? And is that data available for the public?
Yeah, we test regularly. We do hundreds and hundreds of tests a month from faucets throughout our system. We test the water at the tap. We test the water in the treatment process, all through the entire treatment process, in the distribution system, in the reservoirs, and we do this on a regular basis.
That you get out of the reservoir are the same levels in your drinking water at home? Are they the same, or is it brought down some?
No, the quality actually deteriorates in the reservoirs. That's the point of this.
It's pretty simple to filtrate that water.
Let's, rather than have it back and forth, if you'd like, let's just can talk afterwards, right? And Mr. Sickles would like to make one more comment? Sure. Yeah.
Something, that's why I bring my assistant director. She can tell me when I forgot to say something. There will be a public process over the historic aspects of the 106 and all those. So the department is engaged in that area. It's not my area of expertise, but we have people in the department that will make sure those processes and the federal process for the historical reviews is being followed. So
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, here we are 2.5 hours later, and I'd like to think that those who are responsible for making these decisions have a better sense of some of the public sentiment as it was expressed here tonight. And I'm just delighted to hear representatives from the DEP as well as the Passaic Valley Water Commission indicate that what they heard here tonight will in fact be part of the record and will in fact factor into decision making. So we thank you, Joe Bella, and your team for being here, as well as your consultants. We thank Fred and Karen from the NJDEP for being here. It's clear that hearings like this require those like you to have thick skin. And while folks may not always agree with you, we do appreciate the fact that you are here. Some will say that it is too late, but I think that the public dialogue ought to continue because it's healthy for everyone, and it's the way government ought to operate. So thank you, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
Hi, thank you. We just concluded a community forum where we held a presentation on the plans to drain the Levine Reservoir and the neighboring reservoirs in West Patterson. The Passaic Valley Water Commission just displayed their presentation to the public. We invited them here in Patterson. We're here today at the Patterson Museum, where over 80 or 90 folks came out to share the concerns about this project. And as you see behind me, they're closing up now, but we have DEP, representative of the state here, along with the Passaic County Board of Realtors, Njcdc representatives, and the Passaic Valley Water Commission discussing on plans that will eventually affect the community around the national park. Thank you.